Waking up from a dream, I transmigrated into a book. I became the vicious young master in the book who had a volatile temper and loved to torture the dominant protagonist. It was precisely because of my various humiliations towards him that he met his true love partner. As for my ending, when they were deeply in love, I was exiled to a desert island to survive. I sat there in a daze on the leather sofa with my hands and feet in a mess. Suddenly, a sharp pain came from my shoulder. I turned my head. A beautiful girl pointed to a tall and thin boy over there wearing a simple white shirt and black suit pants and showed him to me. Isn't that the campus heartthrob you've been secretly in love with for 108 days? I let out a confused ah. She suddenly had an idea and stroked my head. Since you call me sister, then I'll take care of your happiness. So, with my round eyes wide open, I saw the male lead being pushed into the booth in a daze. He clenched his fists and pressed them against his knees, and our eyes met. Embarrassed, I averted my head. Sister whispered in my ear quietly, brother, I spent a little money tonight to hire Benjamin as a male model to accompany you. I whispered to her in shock. You hired Benjamin as a male model to accompany me? She slapped my shoulder in frustration. Young master, don't be such a coward. It's really not that I'm a coward. It's just that I can't afford to offend the person opposite. Afraid of causing a big problem, I quickly waved my hand to refuse. But suddenly, I had a jolt and heard a system voice, host. You mustn't let this opportunity slip by. Only by severely bullying the dominant protagonist can you fill your wallet, avoid bankruptcy and destitution. Before transmigrating into the book, I was extremely poor, working 10 jobs a day to earn a meager living. Now, I just need to use a little trick to bully the dominant protagonist to maintain my status as a rich young master. It's just that this system is really heartless. If I'm too harsh, my life will be ruined. I leaned over, picked up a piece of watermelon, walked to Benjamin, pinched his chin, and forced him to open his lips. He was pinched very gently and let out a muffled groan. The confusion in his eyes was gradually replaced by a glistening moisture. Staring at his tear-filled eyes, my interest inexplicably soared. What was that saying again? A man's tears are a woman's stimulant. This also applies to men. He turned his head to avoid me, but I grabbed his face and turned it back. I reached out and patted his fair face impatiently. Hey, you're the male model I paid for. Benjamin pursed his lips and lowered his eyes, his fingers tightly clutching the corner of his shirt until his fingertips turned white. His appearance of resolutely refusing but being so pitiful made my heart itch. I used my knee to push his legs apart, stepped in, lifted his chin, and made him tilt his head back to expose his vulnerable Adam's apple. But suddenly I felt something was wrong with standing like this. Before I could figure out the reason, Benjamin twitched the corner of his mouth imperceptibly and opened his lips to bite the piece of watermelon in my hand. I stared calmly at his rolling Adam's apple and thought, no wonder he's the handsome guy who has been on someone's mind for 108 days. Swallowing my saliva, I thrust my palm covered with watermelon juice in front of his eyes. You, wipe it off for me. He glanced at me indifferently and remained motionless. Suddenly, he grabbed my wrist. I blinked in surprise and followed his lead to shift my gaze downward. Not knowing what he was up to for a moment, I could only shut up. I let him hold my hand and place it on his well-defined abs through a thin shirt. I nervously rolled my eyes, but my hand still couldn't hide its rascally nature and touched him. Benjamin glanced at my action as if silently indulging me and only calmly asked, "Is this okay?" My mouth was running ahead of my mind and I replied contentedly, "Of course it's okay. It would be even better if I could take off your clothes and touch you." Suddenly, it became quiet around us. Even the deafening heavy metal music seemed very faint. Only my rascally remark echoed loudly. I tried to save face. After wiping it clean, it's just so. Well, okay, go do something else. Just as I finished speaking, a dark figure suddenly rushed out from the side. Benjamin suddenly pushed me away. A glass of wine was poured over his head. He blinked his wet eyelashes. I dodged behind my sister without getting a drop of wine on me. The dark figure who rushed in was aggressively confronting Benjamin. It was all one-sided scolding from the other side. Benjamin hung his head neither overbearing nor humble. The system encouraged me to be a hero and save the beauty, then take the male lead home and bully him to my heart's content. But the other party was too aggressive in his words. I thought I was too clumsy with words to argue with him, so I carefully bargained with the system. Me, I have a fragile heart. It'll break at the slightest scolding. System, such a good opportunity and you don't even seize it firmly? If you take the dominant protagonist back, you can bully him at will. You can enjoy a life of wealth even while lying down. If you don't have the guts, then just keep being a poor wretch. After the dominant protagonist gains power, it'll be wishful thinking for you to bully him. How dare he hit right at my sore spot? I was so angry that I jumped up and shouted angrily, damn it. This unscrupulous system didn't even consider the consequences of me severely bullying the dominant protagonist. I was so furious that I stamped my feet and roared, damn it. This unscrupulous system didn't care at all about the consequences of me severely bullying the dominant protagonist. I cheered myself up in my heart. Never did I expect that because of my roar, the two men on the verge of a fight both looked in my direction. Jackson's angry face froze for a moment when he saw me. He wiped his face, looking hurt. Were you scolding me just now? And Benjamin, who had been keeping his head down and silent, also looked up in my direction, showing a surprised expression. You, just now, were you scolding me? I wanted to say no, but the system forced me to nod. This lousy system. I'll scold it 1,000,000 times in my heart. Benjamin's expression paused slightly, then he nodded as if he understood. Just when I thought Benjamin would definitely turn around and leave, he actually turned towards me instead. He bent down and bowed deeply, apologizing in a deep voice. His series of actions left me a bit stunned, but the system kept urging me, forcing me to speak with difficulty. I've spent money and you've made my friend unhappy. Tell me, what should I do about this? Benjamin slightly raised his head and said, the young master can do whatever he wants. His dark eyes were like a whirlpool, silently sucking me in. Seizing the opportunity, I walked up to him and, as if possessed, reached out and gently touched his clenched fist. Come with me. Jackson looked at me in shock. He stretched out his arm and blocked my way. I took a step back, stepped on Benjamin's shoe and leaned backward. Just in time, an arm reached across my waist and I was pulled into Benjamin's arms. There was a faint smell of tequila on him, probably because Jackson had splashed wine on him just now. I leaned in his arms and sniffed, racking my brains to come up with a solution. Finally, I came up with a rather unreliable idea. That was to directly act like a pampered and unruly young master. I raised my face, slapped away Jackson's hand, and said coldly, move aside. Don't block my way. Then I grabbed Benjamin's hand and dragged him all the way to the car. But in the car, I was so nervous that my palms were sweating. While he closed his eyes and pretended to doze off, I quickly took out my phone and opened Baidu, Zaya Hongshu, Douyin, and Kuaishou to search for how to bully a handsome guy. But I didn't find anything reliable. The system slyly gave me an idea. How about replacing the words handsome guy with boyfriend? I typed randomly and searched. With a glance, I was directly stunned. Such niche words. Which circle did you lead me into, dear phone? I slowly scrolled through the phone screen. Although the words were niche, I found them very interesting. I didn't even know when Benjamin opened his eyes. I only noticed his well-defined fingers waving in front of my eyes. I calmly put away the phone, cleared my throat, and the driver in front sensibly raised the partition. Benjamin had unbuttoned the first button of his shirt at some point. With his fair skin, the blue veins under his collarbone were faintly visible. He leaned back on the seat calmly, looking like he was at the mercy of others. I pursed my lips tightly and squinted one eye to secretly glance at the guidance on Baidu before taking action. I placed one hand on Benjamin's thigh and leaned towards him. The distance between the two of us suddenly closed. In the cramped space, the ambiguous factors exploded cracklingly. But the clearest thing I heard was the thumping sound of my own pounding heart. I pinched his chin. He lifted his eyelids and looked at me. His dark eyes were clear and his expression was extremely innocent. I was completely flustered and didn't know where to look. Just as I was about to avoid his gaze, the back of my hand suddenly felt hot. He encircled my hand with his palm, gently held it and moved it down to his Adam's apple. With a slight raise of his lips, he asked casually, aren't you going to choke? Kiss? What kiss? I stammered and bit my lower lip. My hand was forcibly controlled by the system to close and clench. Benjamin's cheeks flushed red due to the sense of suffocation and his long and thick eyelashes kept trembling. The veins on his neck throbbed as if enticing me to increase the pressure on my hand. I pursed my lips tightly and a thin layer of sweat broke out on my palm. The little person in my heart knelt down quickly with a confession letter in hand. Realizing that the system had relaxed its control, I immediately withdrew my hand and turned around with my hands and feet moving in unison, turning my back to Benjamin. Are you okay? I murmured in a low voice. The kind-hearted inquiry was as soft as a mosquito's buzz. Benjamin covered his face with his hand, looking vulnerable, and slumped on the back seat. I guiltily poked my fingers, thinking, should I let him choke me back next time? In my anxious thinking, suddenly I heard him ask in a slightly hoarse voice, young master, have you forgotten something? I was so startled by his sudden voice that I shuddered involuntarily and my body trembled uncontrollably. I pretended to be calm and said, "My memory is 1 in a million. How could I forget anything?" As soon as the words left my mouth, I frantically recalled and searched in my mind for what I might have forgotten. How could I remember everything? He sighed softly, his voice weak like the panting after being ravaged. "You've done the choking, but you forgot the kiss." In a daze, I was thrown towards Benjamin by a strong force. It happened so suddenly that I didn't have time to raise my hands to push him away. Before I knew it, our noses were touching. I grimaced in pain as I bumped into his high, bridged nose. The pain made my eyes redden and tears well up. He tried hard not to laugh and reached out to wipe the tears from the corner of my eyes. I turned my face away and said fiercely to save face for myself, "Did I allow you to touch me? If you touch me randomly again next time, you'll lose your hand." He silently withdrew his hand and rubbed the fingers that had touched me on the skin of his neck that was red from being choked. Suddenly, there was another sharp turn. The inertia pushed me violently towards him. In a panic, I turned my head and my lips touched something soft. Benjamin looked at me with misty eyes. Without saying a word, I opened my lips. He frowned slightly. I struggled to get up in a hurry but was only able to tilt my head slightly under the control of the system. If I said this was an accident, would you believe me? I resignedly lowered my head. My cheeks were burning hot, but I had to be pressed tightly against him. Benjamin blinked with a bitten lip. Just as he was about to speak, he was interrupted by the driver sitting in the front. The driver proudly asked for credit from me. "Young master, are you satisfied with what I just did for you? Do you want me to do it a few more times?" He spoke so loudly that he was afraid we two behind the partition couldn't hear. Then he continued, "Young master, I've prepared something for you in your seat. As long as you give the order, I'll immediately pull over and disappear from your sight." Disappear from your sight. I gritted my teeth and told him to shut up, but the system kept clapping in my mind and egging me on to take the opportunity to bully the defenseless Benjamin. It rationally analyzed with me, "Your driver is quite perceptive. You might as well follow his advice and take the dominant protagonist on the car so that he will be infatuated with you from now on and let you drive him around. Will the plot of this book change because of this? Will he still meet his true love? And will my final ending be a happy one? I never thought of leaving the world of the book from beginning to end. All I want is to have a happy ending in the book." The system fell silent. I could understand the meaning of its existence, which was nothing more than to let the world in the book run according to the established track. But I am a transmigrator with a strong will to survive. Although the system remained silent, it told me the irreversibility of the world in the book with its actual actions. A sharp pain like being hit by a heavy object suddenly came from my foot. I let out a soft hiss and clenched my fist to endure it. But I couldn't help muttering in my heart that the system had no conscience at all. I bent down to check the injury on my foot. As soon as I lowered my head, the thing that had hit me just now appeared right in front of my eyes so vividly. It was just a box of contraceptives, but it hit me like a boulder weighing 1,000 June. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes and reached out to pick it up, but Benjamin, who also reached out to pick it up, got there first. My hand froze in the air and my heart was in my mouth as if it suddenly stopped beating in an instant. The body was stiff. It was really dead. I withdrew my hand and straightened up. And the driver was like an NPC set by a program. As soon as he heard the noise from our side, he quickly pulled the car over to the side of the road. He sensibly opened the door and slipped out of the car. He showed a mechanical smile, raised his wrist to look at his watch, and said, "Young master, you can rest assured about my work. It's exactly 9 o'clock at night Beijing time. There is no one or thing within a radius of 10 miles that can disturb your wonderful night." I forced a smile and waved to him, signaling him to get back in the car quickly, but he winked at me playfully and slammed the car door shut. I rubbed my cold hands and looked back at Benjamin. Unexpectedly, I met his eyes. He propped his head up and watched the whole process. He was calm and detached, like a Buddha. But the next second, I honestly retracted what I had just said. This guy is clearly a charming male goblin. He stretched out his long arm and his fair and slender hand supported my neck, forcing me to lean towards him. With his other hand, he playfully crumpled the plastic bag, making it crackle. I couldn't help but hold my breath and cold sweat broke out on my forehead from nervousness. Benjamin squinted his eyes in confusion and asked, "Young master, why are you sweating so much? You also look very nervous." I laughed it off and replied, "I'm afraid of the dark. Whenever I encounter a dim situation, I get nervous." He slowly looked up at the bright car lights above his head and didn't expose me. He just said, "Then let's continue with the lights on." I couldn't help but widen my eyes in disbelief that such words could come out of his mouth. I saw him bite the packaging and tear it open with his mouth. The sound of the plastic bag tearing was like a death knell chasing after me. I quickly broke free from his restraint and didn't hesitate to open the car door and jump out. Stumbling, I sprawled out with my limbs and lay face down on the ground. The hateful system used its authority to fix me in this embarrassing position. I closed my eyes angrily. Benjamin got out of the car, walked over to me, and just stood there, looking down at me condescendingly as if looking down on an ant. I angrily pressed my face against the ground and said, "What are you looking at? It's all because you scared me. Why don't you pull me up?" He bent his knees and squatted down with one knee on the ground. He reached out to pick me up but didn't hold me steady, making me stumble again. With a face full of despair, I tightly grabbed his hand and used his strength to get up from the ground. I whispered complainingly, "Do you know how much it hurts to fall?" He just gave a non-committal grunt as if not taking my words to heart at all. I didn't bother to argue with him. I let go of his hand and limped to the driver's seat, planning to drive away by myself. Who would have thought that the driver had even taken the car keys with him? I turned around dejectedly and ordered him to call the driver to come back and drive. As a result, he showed me 2 mobile phones that were out of power and turned off. This is just crazy. I pinched the area between my eyebrows and turned my back to Benjamin. Dragging my sprained foot, I walked forward and admitted defeat, saying, "Let's go. We'll walk home." "Home? Us?" Benjamin repeated in a barely audible voice. What Benjamin said was so mumbled that I couldn't hear him clearly at all, only to find that he suddenly turned his back to me and rushed in front of me. Bending over with his hands on his knees, he said with rare tenderness, "Come on, I'll carry you on my back." I wasn't being polite either. It would be stupid not to take advantage of this. I climbed onto his back as slowly as a turtle. He wasn't impatient at all and just let me climb at my own slow pace. Only when I probed him and said, "If someone is very mean to you, bullies and humiliates you both physically and mentally, but he has his own reasons, would you forgive him?" The sudden hostility around him made me feel like I was seeing the end of my life. Benjamin asked, "If someone takes pleasure in bullying and abusing others, even if he has his own reasons, the harm has already been done. If it were you, would you be willing to forgive?" I pursed my lips tightly and said sullenly, "What if he is willing to reduce this harm?" "Maybe." It wasn't his intention either. Benjamin continued, "But I'm a person who always gets even." After saying this, he fell silent and carried me home with his head down. I raised my head and accidentally caught a glimpse of the scabs on the side of his neck. These were all marks left by the bullying he had endured. It's true that Benjamin had a handsome face. However, his family was poor. He had to work part-time to pay for his tuition, and he also had an elderly grandmother at home who relied on him for support. He had many part-time jobs. Some of these injuries were from falling and getting scratched while delivering takeaways on a rainy day, and some were from being accidentally injured when dealing with hooligans while working at a late-night snack shop. His life was already so tough, and then he met the original owner, such a good-for-nothing playboy. I let out a heavy sigh. On this long way home on his back, I sighed countless times. When we were near my home, he put me down, avoided my eyes, and reminded me helplessly, sighing, "Will drive away your blessings and good luck." I immediately covered my mouth and shook my head repeatedly, saying, "I won't sigh anymore." He nodded expressionlessly and followed me into the house. I arranged for him to take a shower and sleep in the room next to mine, then slipped back into my room to count my savings. The system appeared leisurely disappointed and said, "What's wrong with you?" "Me, what's the matter?" You wasted the opportunity one created for you. You're such a fool. I really don't know why he chose you." I felt there was more to what the system said. I quickly asked, "Who? Who do you mean chose me? Did I come here because of him?" The system said sarcastically, "He is also a fool. With the two of you, I'm afraid I won't be able to meet my performance target. Now I can only let true love appear earlier." It advised me to be obedient. I counted the money in the passbook back and forth. I planned to convert my current available funds into cash so that I wouldn't have to starve if I went bankrupt. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, I suddenly had an idea. I quickly called Jackson and asked him to pick me up tomorrow. He readily agreed but mentioned that I should stay away from Benjamin. I nodded in agreement, but coincidentally Benjamin was standing at my open door, looking at me with an inscrutable look in his eyes. I swallowed hard and asked, "What's wrong with you? Why are you all wet?" "The water heater in my room is broken. Can I take a shower here?" He was wearing wet clothes and the bangs on his forehead were also covered with water droplets. He looked like a poor little puppy and quite harmless. "Of course you can." I readily agreed to his request. "Anyway, this is just the last period of time we'll be together. It's a long way apart and we probably won't have a chance to see each other again. Benjamin curved his lips and thanked me. I waved my hand and said it was okay. While he went into the bathroom, I immediately hid my passbook securely. While he was taking a shower, I leisurely lay in bed and bickered with the system. It was as irritable as a firecracker and kept calling me a fool. It also said that all the things it taught me before were in vain. But in the end, it reluctantly said, "You're really a bit different." I leaned back against the headboard and wanted to continue asking about him. But the sound of Benjamin pushing the door open interrupted my question. He was wearing the pajamas I casually threw to him. It was my size and looked restrictive on him. I held back my smile, jumped out of bed, opened the door for him, and waved him back to his own room. After seeing off this big Buddha, I immediately wrote vigorously and formulated a perfect plan to flee far away. Before the ink was dry, the door was knocked again. This time it was knocked urgently, as if something serious had happened. I casually grabbed a blanket and covered myself, then quickly got up to open the door. Benjamin was standing at the door, sweating profusely, and the knuckles of his bent fingers were still pink. "What's wrong with you?" I originally wanted to say again, but I was afraid he would misunderstand me, so I held it back. "The air conditioner is broken. It can only heat, not cool." He raised his hand to cover his nose and sneezed. I wondered, why are both the water heater and the air conditioner in your room broken? Benjamin shook his head, looking puzzled. "Forget it. You can stay with me. Anyway, what could happen between two grown men? I'm not straight." He suddenly spoke up. Reminded by his words, I suddenly realized that I wasn't straight either. With ulterior motives, I led him into the room, threw him a quilt and a pillow, and said condescendingly, "This kind of fun tonight is enough. Go back where you came from tomorrow." I made my words crystal clear. Whether he could understand my profound advice depended on himself. In the middle of the night, I suddenly heard the sound of someone shivering from the cold. Half asleep and half awake, I opened my eyes and saw Benjamin curled up on the floor. The quilt on him was too small to cover his 1.89-meter tall body. Lying on the edge of the bed, I woke him up. Seeing him looking at me blankly with his eyes open, I moved to the other side of the bed and patted the empty space, saying, "Come and sleep." Benjamin seemed a bit dazed from the cold air. When he got into the bed, he subconsciously wrapped his arms around me and rested his chin on the top of my head. It was a very insecure posture. I just let him hold me and fell asleep. But in my hazy consciousness, I always felt something like jelly rubbing against my face, ears, and lips. Early in the morning, I was bombarded with calls from my family to attend a banquet. They said that the richest one family had found their long-lost real young master. I never expected that the system had completely advanced this plot. Then today's banquet would be my hallman banquet. I scrambled out of bed, quickly packed my luggage, and planned to review my plan again. But after rummaging through everything for a long time, I couldn't even find a trace of the plan. Damn it. I'm really fuming. I just hoped that Benjamin hadn't picked it up. Speaking of Benjamin, I really didn't see him early this morning. He probably went to prepare for the protagonist's grand entrance. Holding my phone to talk to Jackson, I was busy pushing my suitcase out. As it turned out, the original owner's father had already sent a car to wait at the door. I was dragged to the dinner party. I saw the dominant protagonist hugging his true love partner. A strange feeling of sourness and fullness welled up in my chest inexplicably. I subconsciously reached out and touched my lips. The gentle touch of the lips from yesterday combined with the strange feeling today made my reaction dull. The original owner's father bowed and scraped as he offered a drink to Benjamin's biological father. Seeing me standing still, he quickly waved me over. I obediently walked over, hoping to experience a bit of profound fatherly love. Instead, I got a slap on the back. Fortunately, it was on the back. I grimaced and pretended to be in pain. The original owner's father immediately whispered to me, "What bad things have you done outside again? Your father has to clean up your mess again." There were a lot of white hairs at his temples. Presumably, he had worried a lot about the original owner. Although his words were reproachful, his eyes were filled with undeniable affection. I shook my head, feeling extremely fortunate that I hadn't been controlled by the system to do something irreparable to Benjamin. Not only did I change the beginning of the story between Benjamin and me, but I also cut off the future of our story. Then I should also successfully rewrite the ending. I happily rubbed the place that had just been slapped and acted coquettishly with my dad. "How could I cause trouble for you again? Am I that useless? Dad, you can rest assured." Before I could finish my sentence, I was interrupted by the true love interest who suddenly appeared. He pointed at me. Filled with righteous indignation, he said, "Uncle John, it's him. The person I told you about yesterday is him. It was he who bullied and insulted Benjamin again and again, and it was he who constantly obstructed Benjamin from recognizing you. I reached out to block his accusation and advised him, dude, don't talk nonsense. When did I ever bully Benjamin? You need to show evidence if you're going to say such things. Don't wrong me, an upright young man who meets all the criteria of a good citizen. His cheeks flushed red and the finger pointing at me bent guiltily. He stammered for a long time but couldn't produce any evidence. I tilted my head and smiled at him. Since you can't provide evidence, I have something to do and I'll take my leave. Excuse me. Wait. Benjamin, dressed in a suit, walked towards me with a wine glass in one hand. How could I wait? Jackson was probably going crazy waiting for me outside. I quietly stepped back and Benjamin followed me. Seeing that something was wrong, my dad immediately grabbed my hand and pulled me behind him. Benjamin stopped walking. His slender fingers stroked the transparent wine glass and his eyes were obscure as if he was waiting for something. I silently counted to 3 in my heart, getting ready to run away. When I counted to 3, the wine glass suddenly slipped from his fingers and fell to the ground. The sound of the broken glass stopped me from running away. I looked around in surprise and it seemed that time had stopped flowing at that moment. I gave my dad a heavy pat, but he still maintained his original posture. Only Benjamin was the only one within my sight who could move freely. He knelt down and reached out to pick up the pieces of the wine glass. I subconsciously reminded him to be careful. Be careful. Don't cut your hand. Otherwise, you'll have another scar. He lowered his head and looked at the broken glass, hooked his lips, and reached out. His fingertip was cut and a drop of blood stained it. Time suddenly began to flow again, but it was flowing backwards. I stood there stupidly, unable to move my hands and feet. Time shifted to the moment when the true love interest came out to identify me. I held my breath and watched him haughtily take out the evidence from his trouser pocket, a USB flash drive. The USB flash drive recorded every single thing the original host had done to bully and humiliate Benjamin. It turned out that what the book didn't record was that most of the scars on Benjamin's body came from the original host. I looked at the video on the USB flash drive in a daze, my heart pounding. When I met the gaze of the person in the video who stubbornly lifted the car from the ground in the rain, I seemed to empathize with him for a moment. It was raining heavily that day. The once high-spirited son of heaven had his self-esteem damaged on a desolate rainy night. If I said that I didn't do the things on this, that I've never done them, would you believe me? No. If it wasn't you, then who? Do you have a twin brother? I turned to look at Benjamin. He slightly curved his lips at me, but when everyone's gazes turned towards us, he became cold again. It turned out that he was the mastermind. He was in cahoots with the system to keep the plot in the book on the right track. I sniffed, put my hand on my chest, put on a look of extreme grievance, and played the victim in front of everyone. I know no matter what I say now, you won't believe me. I'm sorry to Benjamin about this. I want to talk to him alone. The true love interest poured a glass of red wine directly on my head. He viciously blocked me and said, dream on. I'll never give you another chance to get close to Benjamin. Fine, fine. Good people get bullied. Now I'm outnumbered. I won't argue with you for now. I pretended to be frightened by his anger and kept backing away and fell down the moment I got close to my father. I'll faint first and see what you can do to me. Awake? Afraid to open your eyes and look at your old man. Hearing my father's kind voice, I sat up with a turn and hugged him, explaining, Dad, I really didn't do those things. Really? He hunched his back and fell into silence, then told me some very bad news. Our family went bankrupt because the Wen family withdrew their investment from our family's major project. But it's not a big deal. I've already bought the tickets back to our hometown. I'll take you back to the countryside to farm. I thought it was impossible for the system and Benjamin to let me go so easily. After all, I'm the biggest bug in this world. However, my father really acts with determination and vigor. He saw me wake up in the morning and in the afternoon he dragged me on a self-driving trip back to our hometown, hiding along the way. After living leisurely in my hometown for half a month, I suddenly remembered that I hadn't reported my safety to Jackson. I changed a phone card and called Jackson. Just after I said hello, the next second he let out a shrill scream, Samuel, you're really a fool. What are you calling me for at this time? I blinked in confusion. To report my safety to you. Another cold voice interrupted and replied, got it. It was Benjamin's voice. I hung up the phone quickly and went to the fields with my father, carrying a hoe nervously. I hadn't even finished planting half of the pepper trees in the field when Benjamin forcefully carried me on his shoulder and took me home. He cornered me by the bedside, looked at my hand, and let out a soft laugh from the corner of his lips. I dare not disobey the young master's order. He gradually leaned towards me, probably recalling the scene of our first meeting. I panicked and slapped him in the face with the hand that had just planted the pepper trees. His cheeks instantly turned red and even tears welled up in the corners of his eyes. I quickly knelt on the bed and begged for forgiveness. "Sorry, I got pepper juice in your eyes." Benjamin reached out to wipe away his tears, pulled me up, and took me to the bathroom to wash my hands. His face looked a bit grim, but my face looked even worse, pale lips and a pale face. Just thinking that he was the he mentioned by the system made my legs, waist, stomach, and head ache. I felt pain all over. "I'm not feeling well. Can you go out first?" I asked cautiously. He held my hand and carefully washed it with hand sanitizer 2 or 3 times before agreeing to my request. There was a window in the bathroom. I stood on the toilet and propped myself up by holding the windowsill. "Do you need a hand?" I didn't even need to turn around to know it was Benjamin. I gave in and gave up the idea of jumping out of the window. I followed him dejectedly back to the room. Now the system simply ignores me. Even though I really want to ask it about Benjamin, I don't have the chance. I don't know the reason why Benjamin brought me back, but I do remember him saying that he was a man who never forgot a grudge. I'm like a fish on the chopping block every day, waiting for his knife to fall. I stayed up for 4 whole nights and only dared to sleep soundly after he left my room. But he always insisted on sitting until 4 o'clock in the morning before leaving. I couldn't hold it back any longer and asked, "Are you a bot? Don't you need to sleep? Are you going to lurk around every day to watch the sleepless crabapple blossoms?" He sat on the opposite sofa, resting his forehead in silence. I wondered if this was his way of getting revenge, making me stay up late until I croaked. This is so insidious. I advised him kindly, saying things like, "Man is iron, sleep is steel. Without sleep, one can only be iron and not become useful steel." He propped his face on his hand and leaned on the sofa, staring straight at me with a strange look in his eyes. On the 7th night of my forced stay, up, in a fit of anger, I pounced on him on the sofa, straddling him with my legs, and shouted hoarsely at him, "If you want to torture me, you don't have to do it like this. Do you know the pain of insomnia? You don't let me sleep during the day, making me feel guilty while watching the videos on the USB drive. And at night, you just sit in the room and stare at me. Give me back my 8-hour sleep." Benjamin put his arms around my waist to prevent me from falling and gently patted my back as if trying to soothe my collapsing emotions. If he had continued to be cold and heartless towards me, I could have held back my emotions. But he just showed me a little bit of tenderness and my defenses crumbled completely. Only he knows where I come from. He knows my past, the past of the original owner, but I have no idea about his plans with the system. I reiterated again that I had nothing to do with the videos on the USB drive. I rambled on about my past to him and asked him with a sob in my voice, "Why on earth did you choose me? You know I'm not him. Why are you treating me like this? Since the moment I transmigrated, I've been trying to change the plot. I never wanted to hurt you." He lovingly pressed his face against my tear-soaked cheek and sighed softly, "Why indeed? Because you're the one and only sweetheart I picked out from millions of data. I want to keep you." My sobbing suddenly stopped. So I was the sweetheart he had chosen. The development of things was so absurd that I wished I could summon the system so that the 3 of us could clear things up. "You're really crazy," I couldn't help but sigh as I looked at his increasingly passionate eyes. He scraped his fingertips across my red eyelids, lifted his lips into a smile and said, "So if you're going to be crazy, you have to go all the way. You're not qualified to leave me. You're the one I've chosen." He told me that the system had required the plot to be changed, but he had exploited a bug and kicked the system out. Now he was in charge of the world in the book. That system is so useless. It even dared to call me an idiot and couldn't tell who the master was. I tried to communicate with him calmly. "Now that we've cleared the air, I promise I won't leave. Can I stop watching the videos? And you don't have to sit here at night anymore, right?" He looked a bit surprised, as if he had never thought I would stay, like a child caught off guard by a pleasant surprise. He nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again, and finally, in a muddle, intertwined his fingers with mine and said, "As long as you don't leave." His happiness rarely showed on his face. I was a bit shocked to see him smiling like a happy child. His sudden change in attitude really suited me. I happily enjoyed his treats and all the money he had after transforming from a poor campus hunk into the heir of a billionaire. And I even had to give him pocket money every month. Whenever he made me unhappy, I would have his allowance. If he made me happy, I would give him an extra $1 as a token of my appreciation. I thought he would go crazy like before, but unexpectedly, he seemed to enjoy it quite a bit. Every day he would do the laundry and cook with a cold face. He insisted on doing everything himself and never let the maid do it. I once thought I was in a relationship with him, but looking at his demeanor, it didn't seem so. Afraid that he was just being obtuse, I decided to be straightforward and asked him if he felt that there was any change in our relationship. He was rubbing our intimate clothes with his hands full of bubbles. Shaking his head with his still noble and cold handsome face, he said, "No change. You're mine." I shook my head and walked away with my hands behind my back. As expected, he was just being possessive and didn't get it. I found an opportunity to talk to him about going back to school. He smiled and said he would arrange it for me. I doubted the credibility of his words, but the next day he proved my pettiness with actual actions. Right after I finished talking to the school leaders, I ran into the true love interest who was waiting for me. He glared at me with a sinister look in his eyes as if I were his enemy. "You've altered the development of the story. You should disappear from both worlds." I took a few steps back and asked, "Are you the system?" He sneered with a sense of self-abandonment like a person who has nothing to lose. "You've changed the ending of your story, causing the whole story to deviate. The dominant protagonist who was supposed to be with me has fallen in love with you. Now, only by destroying you can I use new data to replace James. You know you're the only one who's gone wrong. So the world keeps restarting." As the dominant protagonist, Benjamin has to experience everything in the story repeatedly. He has to endure the torture again and then rise up. Some of his wounds looked like old scars. You've guessed it? It doesn't matter. The beautiful, strong, and tragic persona of the dominant protagonist will never collapse. He will go through the hardships, rise, die, and restart in the story over and over again. I asked indifferently, "Then how are you going to destroy me? I'm just a tiny ant struggling to survive in the real world. In the book world, my life is always at the mercy of others. But now I want to fight for Benjamin's freedom." When Benjamin arrived, I was already at odds with the true love interest on the side of the road. He gritted his teeth, clenched his fists, and punched at my face. I thought that since he had taken on a human form, he should have lost his power as the system. Then it would be easy to deal with him. Benjamin protectively pulled me behind him and took a punch from the system without any defense. I tightly grabbed his wrist and pulled him towards me, shaking my head at him and saying, "Let me handle this." He frowned in confusion, not understanding how I could solve it. I rolled my eyes and teased him, "I have a good idea." Benjamin never expected that I would choose the way of perishing together with the system. At the moment when the truck hit me, I firmly locked the system. A white light flashed before my eyes, and vaguely I heard Benjamin's hoarse and choking voice in my ear. "I can destroy the data and the system. I only want you to stay. Isn't that okay?" I slowly moved my lips, but couldn't respond to him because I lost my voice. But this is the best ending. Benjamin is finally free. I hope his life will be free from worries and hardships in the future and he won't be bullied anymore. I hope he can meet more kind-hearted people like me. I gloomily put a grass root in my mouth and chewed it when I was idle. I really don't know if it's a good thing to have traveled back. I had just woken up not long ago. When I was walking on the street, someone stuffed a flyer into my hand out of the blue. I didn't want to pick up trash on this small island under the scorching sun at first. But the pay was really too good. I had just traveled back and was as poor as a church mouse, so I had to take this lucrative job. I pulled down my straw hat to cover my forehead, bent down and lowered my head, and picked up trash dutifully. I took breaks from time to time while picking up trash. When the moon rose, I carried a half-filled snakeskin bag of trash back. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of a dark figure, which looked very much like a big piece of trash that could fill my snakeskin bag. I walked over with shining eyes, showing a kind and amiable smile on my face, planning to coax that big piece of trash. Unexpectedly, that big piece of trash spoke first. "Can you pick me up?" I thought carefully and said, "My bag may not be able to hold you. I'll go back and change one." He grabbed my wrist. His face was dirty, and his expression showed both the joy of getting something back and the fear that it might be a mirage. "Don't go." I clasped his hand back, pulled him up, and made his already dirty face even dirtier. "Then let's go together. You can go back and pick a sack by yourself." Benjamin nodded and walked side by side with me. There was also the fear that it might be a mirage. "Don't go." I clasped his hand in return, pulled him up, and made his already dirty face even dirtier. "Then let's go together. You go back and pick out a sack by yourself. Benjamin nodded and walked side by side with me. Wherever you are, I'll be there. His eyes were full of tenderness and sincere love, like a galaxy pouring down. But perhaps because it was the first time he said so, his eyelashes kept trembling. I looked up at the moon and the stars, but not at him. I just said, "It's not that you've chosen me now. It's a two-way pursuit between us."